Tonight, I want to talk to you about the flock doomed to slaughter. That's not my title. That was the title in the NASB, but I've left it, and but it's caused me to do a lot of thinking. Now, Zechariah was written about 180 years after the ones like Jeremiah and Isaiah and those. And it was written, though, about 500 years before Christ. And yet it was very specific in messianic prophecies that as we've seen, some of what is in this chapter, we'll see that this was fulfilled 500 years after the writing of Zechariah. It was fulfilled literally in the life of Christ. Some of it may be difficult to know. Is he talking here about things that were going to happen in Christ's first coming or in his second coming? And sometimes the teaching seems to almost overlap as though it was one event, because of the fact that, as I've explained to you, or we've talked about in days go by, that it's like looking at mountains at some distance, and if you're far enough back from the mountains, it looks like the mountains are together, one on top of the other almost, like it's just two side-by-side mountains. But when you get up close enough, you can realize that there's a long valley in between. It's a lot that way with prophecy, as we see these prophecies, and it'll be talking about one, but then it's drifting over into the other, and it's hard to sometimes delineate the line between the mountains or between the two prophecies, and so which is the latter and which is the former. However, these things that it's talking about from here on out, almost all of it, seems to deal with the things of the very end of the age, of salvation, the church age, the time when the doors are open for Christ. And so, and it's talking here, this battle that we're talking about here, I believe it's a good possibility that we have seen the beginning part of that. So you saw the things that we talked about last week and the setting up. Now here, I think this is where you could almost draw the line, say, that was last week. This coming thing, though, has not yet really taken place. But there are some things that are going to take place, things that are soon going to take place. So you know that how that God has dealt with Lebanon, and God has dealt with Hezbollah in Lebanon, but He also has dealt with Hamas in Gaza. And right at the beginning of this war, I read you, we studied some about Gaza and what He said about how that it would be devastated and abandoned to the largest degree. And those things, now we've progressed past that, but Israel right now, since October 7th, has been at a state of very strongly at a state of war. And as that war goes forward, that war is not just against Gaza, or not just against Hamas. Hamas did the slaughter of the Jews on October 7th, but they were not solely responsible for that. I don't know whether it will ever come out or never come out, or whether it's even a fact or not, but you probably know that in the last couple of days, the president of Iran died in a helicopter crash in the mountains of northern Iran. And I'm not saying that somebody tinkered with their altimeter or that somehow this was brought down by anything other, or even by the Lord, anything other than the fact that they were flying too low, or flying through hills and trying to fly through the valleys. There might have been some reason why they were doing that. I don't know why, but they ran it into the ground, and it killed not only the president, it killed a foreign minister and some other ministers as well. That might be spoken of in this chapter. I'm not sure about that. There are two or three things about that might be, but those three that are attacking that are behind the attacks against Israel, and by that I mean Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi rebels. Those three were all under the control, command and control, let's say, of Iran. And the one who had to give that permission for the things that took place in October 7th, as well as all the rest of this that's gone on, was the president of Iran, who has been hated by his own people, or was hated by his own people, and has been called the butcher of Tehran because of the thousands of Iranians that he has had put to death. Men, yes. Women, yes. Teenagers, yes. Boys and girls, as well as children that have been openly hung from bridges and from cranes and other things as a sign to the others to keep them all under control. He's the one that was behind all of that. He's the one that was killed. Now, I don't know exactly where the battle lines will draw now, but when things turned out the way they did, when Iran sent all of those hundreds of rockets against Israel that would have devastated Israel had not the other nations around them destroyed the ones that came over their areas, as well as the United States and Great Britain and others that joined into that and destroyed all of those rockets and missiles. Israel made a very limited attack, but they said that wasn't the end of it. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all to find out that that Israel, they have the ability, the Mossad has the ability to reach out and touch someone anywhere in the world. There's nowhere that you can actually hide, nor any leader have perfect security that they can't get through. But that's true of these others as well. And so in a little while we'll read about the 3 shepherds that will all be killed in 1 month. Whether that has anything to do with this or not, I can't guarantee. It just seems like it fits. But the thing that fits now is, so as they are finishing up or trying to finish up in Gaza, I know that they have to finish the work. I think there's 4 or 5 brigades still of Hamas in those tunnels under in Gaza, and so as they are finishing that up, there has been limited rocket fire, missile fire from Lebanon, but Lebanon has been given maybe in the multiple thousands, maybe over 100,000, maybe many times over 100,000 missiles, and they're not these little rockets like has been being fired, but these are guided missiles that have the ability to strike with precision missiles that Lebanon has. Where did they get those? They were shipped to Lebanon from Iran or through Syria. And so now there's another war that is getting ready to start, and I don't know when it will start. I wouldn't be a bit surprised, though, if it's not part of the same war that's going on. So it's a good possibility that it will come soon. And that in that attack, there will be not only Lebanon, Hezbollah, not only Hamas, but Syria also will suffer the wages of that. We'll look at that in a few minutes in another passage as well. But he says here in Zechariah chapter 11, verse 1, "Open your doors, O Lebanon, that fire may feed on your cedars." Now, Lebanon has always been known for its cedars, for its trees, its cypress trees, its cedar trees. And I had to look up cypress trees just to make sure what they look like. And I realized that we have trees that look just like that. So they look almost like a Christmas tree, that type of tree, but they go way high. Now that's what most of them look like. There's what's called a ball cypress tree and like that as well. But the cypress trees are very tall, narrow compact trees that are around a central stem with the limbs. And what I didn't realize is that I had cut a couple of them that were probably cypress, that I didn't know what they were, at one of the houses that we were getting ready, thinking maybe we were going to move into, and clean that up. And then after I saw that, I realized those were probably cypress trees, and we've had others that have been around. They do grow here. I didn't realize that. If they're planted and watered, they'll grow. But anyway, the thing that Lebanon's been known for is its cedar. So you remember when Solomon was building his temple, or that temple, Solomon's temple, or when David was building his palaces and all of that, where did the wood come from? It came from Lebanon. So in Lebanon, they had people that could fell the trees and could clean it all up and make large bundles of it together, and over the water bring it down so that they could then have that wood to use, because there's very little extra wood or trees in a lot of Israel, and especially in the area where they needed it. That's where the cedar came from, so that everything could be paneled with cedar. And so you see that. But now he says, open your doors, O Lebanon, that a fire may feed on your cedars. So the trees that he's talking about in this verse and the verses that follow, I believe are talking about countries. And so the countries, here it makes it clear that Lebanon is the country that is talking about. I think that's where the next war is going to start. That's where the next attack is going to happen. I don't know if Lebanon is going to open fire against Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and some of those, or exactly how that's going to go about. They have been doing that to some degree, but Israel has had to pull a lot of their people out of that northern Israel area. And so all the way from the Golan Heights, which is next to Syria, all the way across, and all of that is talked about in this passage, across that part of southern Lebanon, that's all filled with firepower and all, and northern Israel has had to be abandoned to a large degree. The people have had to move out, and that can't stand, and it won't stand very long. So as soon as Israel is finished with Hamas, it's almost a certainty that they're going to go into Lebanon next. It's a possibility they will go against Yemen, but it's a greater probability that they will go against Lebanon. When they go against Lebanon, it won't be just against Lebanon. They will also go against Syria, and they will go against Jordan. Right now, Jordan is with them, but a lot of Jordan is going to be destroyed in this war that's coming. So there's another war coming, and my way has been recently to try to wait until after the fact to bring these things up. So to wait till a week after instead of a week ahead or whatever. But nevertheless, at this point, maybe it is a good idea that we look ahead and say what is coming. Now, he said, open your doors, O Lebanon, that fire may feed on your cedars. So there's a sense in which it's Lebanon that's going to open the doors. It's Lebanon that will open the doors. How did they do that? They will do that by launching an attack against Israel. It may be a devastating attack. It may be one that could be devastating. Were it not for God's intervention, it could be very well could be devastating. Even though with God's help and God's whatever God does, it may be that there will still be a lot of devastation in Israel, because we know that once this is started, even though Israel's going to turn to the Lord, and it'll make that clear, especially in the verses that will follow this, that they will look on the one whom they've pierced, and they will mourn for him, and there will be a fountain open for their cleansing and all of that when that time comes, because they're going to accept Christ. But in the beginning part of that, there's going to be a great amount of destruction and devastation, so that only a third part of Israel will come through safely through the fire that's coming against them. Having said that, Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Turkey and Iran and Russia and any of the others that are with them are going to suffer a far greater fate than what Israel will. Israel will be cut by 2/3, but like with Russia, depending on what translation you read, Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 1, one translation of that, the King James, says, "I will leave but a sixth part of thee," meaning Russia. However, in the other translations, it doesn't even say that. They will be devastated. They will be not decimated. They will be destroyed. Their armies will be. Now, I know that the nations themselves will be granted extension of life for some time, including the United States as well, though, but when this time comes. But we'll talk more about that as days to come. But he said, "Open the doors that a fire may feed on your cedars." When they open the door, by what they do, then fire will feed on their cedars, and that means it will burn it off. So if you look at Lebanon, when you see where Hezbollah is attacking, and you'll see that there will be forest fires. There will be fires because when Israel strikes back, it lights the hillsides on fire, and those fires have to be put out because they are burning. They burn there because it is forest. All of that's forest. But here he's using cedars as a representation then of Lebanon. Then he says, "Wail, O cypress, for the cedar has fallen." So the cypress tree probably maybe is another country, but it's a country, and I believe it's probably the northern Jordanian area is probably what it's talking about, but it could also be talking about Syria, because as I'll hopefully we'll read to you in just a little bit, I'll show you why I say that. But wail, O cypress, for the cedar has fallen. So they will weep because the cedar, the cypress, the oaks, because the glorious trees have been destroyed. Wail, O oaks of Bashan. Now Bashan is that northern area of Jordan into Syria that includes the various areas in Syria that are next to Israel. So the Golan Heights is part of this area of Bashan. It was the area known as Gilead. It was the area where I think it was the tribe of Reuben, and then some of the others were in that area at one time. And so, but the oaks of Bashan. However, I can't help but wonder as well if the oaks may also have some reference to the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and I'll show you the reason for that in just a little bit. But anyway, it says, "For the impenetrable forest has come down." So those forests that were hiding everything that couldn't be penetrated will come down, and they will burn to the ground and what's coming. There's a sound of the shepherd's wail, for their glory is ruined. There's the sound of the young lion's roar, for the pride of the Jordan is ruined. And the young lions, I know this is talking about the pride of Jordan, and so the pride of Jordan would be that upper area of Jordan, maybe that northern area of Jordan. I'm not so sure about all of that. But the young lions, anytime I read about the young lions, I can't help but think about the fact that Great Britain or the United Kingdom is the old lion. They're the lion. But the young lions, a lot of times in the references that I see about that, I can't help but wonder if that's talking about the United States, Canada, Australia, and those who are the Anglo or Caucasian colonies of the old lion. And so they are the young lion. I'm not sure about that. But when it's talking about the pride of the Jordan, it means might mean, instead of just pride in the sense that we normally think of it, as a lion's pride. In other words, as the group of the group of lions that have come out of an area. And so we know that these came across there. Carol, I think your mic may be on. So the young lions and the pride of the Jordan is ruined, it says. So this is going to be a devastating time. So before I get into the flock doomed for slaughter, which is what it's going to talk here about, I want to talk about that. But I want to real quickly to go back 700 years to Isaiah. No, I don't want to do. Let me think for a second whether I do or don't. I think I will. Yeah. So go back to Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1. And he talks about the oracle concerning Damascus. And he said, "Behold, Damascus is about to be removed from being a city and will become a fallen ruin." I talked to you about that when we studied this before, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. Just to say this, that Damascus is the oldest, to the best of our knowledge, the oldest continually inhabited city in the world. It's always been inhabited. A lot of other cities may be older or as old, but they have been destroyed and built back on the mounds over and over and over again. Damascus has been in existence, continually in existence, from the book of Genesis all the way back to the time of Abraham and all that went on back in those days. Damascus was already a major city back in those days. But Damascus is about to be removed from being a city and will become a fallen ruin. When will that happen? I believe it's in this war that it's talking about. So I believe these are talking about the same thing. There's 180 years difference in when they were written. So that Zechariah was written after Isaiah by 180 years, but it's still 500 years before Christ. And yet is talking about a war at the very end of this age. So I'm just going to very quickly read this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We have in days gone by. But Damascus will become a fallen ruin. The cities of Aurora are forsaken. They will be for flocks to lie down in, and there would be no one to frighten them. All the cities that I just was talking about in Syria and northern Jordan, that area that belonged to Gilead, those cities are going to be forsaken. Not only Damascus, but the cities in that general area of Syria will be forsaken. There'll be, and I suspect I know why. I can think of two different reasons why it could be, but there could be chemical, biological, or radiological weapons used that would cause the cities to be uninhabitable. So biological, you can see very clearly why that would be. That would be contagious diseases that are in that area if that's used as a weapon, or chemical, and that is the chemicals that are used that would still be in the area that would make the air unusable, make it to where that people could not live there. However, there will be flocks of various kinds that will lie down there because no one will frighten them. And so that makes me think it's probably not chemical, but could still very easily be biological. But it also could be radiological. And so what I suspect may happen is that, I don't know who, but someone may use a nuclear weapon when that time comes. And right now there's a lot of testing going on and a lot of stuff going on, and the U.S. is involved in it just as much as some of the others, but they're testing each other is what it really comes down to. And so we did a test that was subcritical but really close to being a nuclear test just within, I think, the last few days, within the last week anyway. And I noticed that North Korea is responding to that. I don't know how they're going to respond. Russia, day after day, is talking about redeveloping and redeploying their tactical nuclear weapons. We use strategic nuclear weapons, and that means when they hit, they don't hit a tactical target, a smaller target, but they hit a very large target, like a city or something big, where they actually take out large things. And Russia has both kinds, and I suspect China may as well. I don't know about that. But anyway, those are going to be, this area will be uninhabitable. Why will it be uninhabitable? We're going to see that fire has something to do with it. So it's going to be burned off, and it may be burned off by a nuclear weapon. And the part of the reason I would say that is I'm not going to look at Ezekiel 38, 39. I wish almost that I could take Ezekiel, Isaiah, and Zechariah and put them all almost together. I've done that to some degree in days gone by, but so that we can see these same events, how they looked at various times by various writers. But nevertheless, just this, to see that the cities of Syria will be forsaken. The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim. Now, Ephraim, as I've explained in the last couple of times that we've been together, Ephraim in the last days, more than likely, is talking about, that Ephraim is talking about probably either Great Britain or the United States. And some believe that Great Britain is actually more Manasseh, but that Ephraim left, and they're the people of the covenant, the people of the crossed arms, because of how Jacob crossed his arms when he blessed the sons of Joseph, so that he put his right hand on Ephraim, making him the leader, and then he put his left hand on Manasseh. And so, but it said the fortified city will disappear from Ephraim. It's a possibility that in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about fire falling on the coastlands. When it falls on Magog, the city of Gog, it will also fall on the coastland. So that may be the continents, and may be talking about the same thing it means here by Ephraim. But it also could be that Ephraim's that northern part of Israel, where we think of this nation of Israel today, then that northern part of that is Ephraim. From that was also called Ephraim, although it was the 10 tribes. It was referred to often as Joseph, or as Ephraim, or also as Israel. And so the fortified city will disappear from Ephraim. Sovereignty from Damascus. Well, Damascus and the remnants of Aram, that means the remnants of Aram are the Syrians. Damascus will lose its sovereignty. That is, it will lose, there will be no nation of Syria. And the remnant of Aram, if those that are left, they will no longer be under Syria. In fact, they will be under Israel. Israel will, in due time, inhabit and occupy that land. They will be like the glory of the sons of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts, it says here. So they will join together with Israel, or they will be like the Egyptians, and the Syrians will be a group, part of a group of three, with Israel in the middle, and they all will be worshiping Christ when the day comes. They will be like the glory of the sons of Israel, declares the Lord of hosts. Now on that day, the glory of Jacob will fade, and the fatness of his flesh will become lean. That's what I was talking about when I mentioned it doesn't tell us that here, but in other places it does tell us that only, as in fact I think we'll see it when we get back into Zechariah, that most of Israel will be destroyed, and so their flesh will become lean. That means that most of the Israelis will die, will be destroyed in this time. It will be even as the reaper gathering the standing grain, as an arm harvests the ears, or it will be like one gleaning ears of grain in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleanings will be left in it, like the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 olives on the topmost bough, 4 or 5 on the branches of a fruitful tree, declares the Lord, the God of Israel. But notice this next verse. In that day, man will have regard for his Maker, and his eyes will look on to the Holy One of Israel. So this is when Israel, and this is true whether it be in Ezekiel or Isaiah, here that we're reading, or Zechariah, as we will be reading in the days to come, that all is in this exact same order, the same events, everything, including the fact that they will turn to Christ. Man, in that they will look to Christ, look to the one, the Holy One of Israel. It says, look, his eyes will look to the Holy One of Israel. All right, so back in Zechariah then. So he says, he talks about all of those that are going to go through that. That's all up to this point. But now, this is almost parenthetically in here, and this has to do, first of all, with Judas, but it also has to do with the Antichrist. So Judas is the typical or prototypical figure of the Antichrist. Judas was the Antichrist in a sense, in a earlier form, and he did the Antichrist work. Satan filled him, Satan inhabited him, and he will again, the Judas of the last age, the last Judas, or it will be the Antichrist. And so now the Lord, thus says the Lord my God, pasture the flock doomed to slaughter. So now he's using a figure, and it's real hard for me to follow in this a little bit, where does he actually want Zechariah to adopt or put on the clothing of a shepherd as he's telling this? It's a possibility, so that they understand, and carry a staff in each hand, and that he's inscribed names on and like that. Is that what he really wants? Is that what he's wanting? And yet it's obvious that this one represents the Lord's dealing with the nation of Israel. And I would not want to be in the position of what he's talking about there, but if the Lord tells him to do it, he's talking here then, and some of this is talking to Christ, and some of it is talking to the Antichrist. Some of it is talking to Judas, and some of it is talking to the Antichrist. So it's kind of a little difficult to follow, but let's do our best. So that says the Lord God, pasture the flock doomed to slaughter. Now, back when Joyce and I first got married, and I came back from overseas. So we spent the first year, I was overseas, she was in the States, but we came back and put the money that had been saved into a farm. We bought a farm. And even though I grew up on a farm, I'm not a farmer, just like to play like one. And so I was working outside and all of that. But my younger brother, Stan, he was a good farmer, and he understood what he was doing. But he had a sow, a sow that had lots of pigs when she would have pigs, and she got into poisonous grain that was for killing the gophers and like that. And so I don't think she died, but I think the concern was that she couldn't feed the pigs. She just had a litter, had pigs, and so she couldn't feed them. So Joyce and I took those, was it 7 pigs we started with? So I think we took 7 pigs, and we raised them. First of all, on our back porch, which was enclosed, we raised them. We bottle fed them. We'd get up and in the middle of the night, every 2 hours or whatever it was, and we would feed them with bottles, and we did all that, and then out into the hot house, and then various things. Well, they made it. I don't think we lost any of those, did we? And so so then, in due time, the 3 females, let's say, we decided that we would keep them, and we would breed them, and they would have pigs, and we would be in the hog business, and we really would have been. And it's very fortunate that the Lord called us just prior to the fact of that fulfilling what would have otherwise. But the 3 that were male at birth, weren't male not very long after that, but 4 of them were male at birth. One of them we actually butchered, but the other 3, they were the flock, or you could say of swine, of hogs, that were for slaughter. That's what they were for. And so from the time that they were babies all the way through, We knew that 3 of them we intended to keep for sows, and 3 of them, when they were topped out, reached a certain weight, certain size, that they would be loaded in a trailer and taken off. They were the pasture of the flock doomed to slaughter. Now, you know that among the Jews, there would be a flock of sheep. And in that flock of sheep, there would be ewes, and there would be rams, and there would be lambs. But there was a group of there was some of the flock that was separated out. And what was the purpose of that? It was what would become food. So these are to be sheared, but these, after they're sheared, are to be eaten. That was the idea. They were doomed for slaughter. And I knew some folk that we went out to visit, and they had gotten 2 pigs that they were raising, and but they were raising them almost like pets. And I asked them, what are their names? That one's Sausage, and this was named Bacon. They wanted to keep in mind that that these were not pets. They were the flock doomed to slaughter. So he said, pasture of the flock doomed to slaughter. And now those who buy them, slay them, and go unpunished. That's what they're for. That was the intention. But in those that are coming in the last day, those who buy them and slay them, it's talking partially about the Jews, I believe, but also probably talking about Christians in the days soon to come. Those who buy them and slay them go unpunished. But when you're raising livestock for food, those who buy them, slay them, go unpunished, because that's why they were raised. That was the purpose of their being raised. And each of those who sell them says, blessed be the Lord, for I have become rich. And their own shepherds have no pity for them. They know that's what their purpose is. And so this is, like I say, this is a little difficult to describe and to understand what it's saying. But here's what God is saying then. For I will no longer have pity on the inhabitants of the land, declares the Lord. Now God has watched over Israel. I thank God for that. And I can't help but believe that God has watched over the United States to a large degree because of our relationship with Israel. And that God has blessed the United States because of Israel. And a lot of people say, well, God's blessed Israel because of the United States. I think it's more that God has blessed, even though they have not accepted Christ. They've not accepted God's plan. And they are still, to a large degree, obstinate, and they're to a large degree secular. Nevertheless, they are God's people. We need to be very careful what we do. But God has had pity on them. And over again, God has provided them victory in their battles. And I think partially because we have backed them, that God has granted us victory in our battles in these times that otherwise we might have lost. But the day is coming when God says, I will no longer have pity on the inhabitants of the land, declares the Lord. He said, for behold, I will cause men to fall, each into another's power, and into the power of his king, and they will strike the land, and I will not deliver them from their power. And so God is saying there will reach an end to my willingness to put up with this any longer. And so that day is coming, and when that time comes, you can consider them the flock doomed, the doomed to slaughter, because at that point they will be delivered. Everyone delivered to their kings. And there is a war coming that is unlike any war has ever been. I think it's going to be worldwide, and we've heard of world wars, but this one is really going to be a world war. I'm sorry if I offended someone, but nevertheless, I'm going to continue. You may not know what's happened. You probably do, though. I've got a black screen that I may or may not be able to do a thing about. Let's see what I could do in a case like that. There we go. Now let's see if I can get that to come back on. Okay. So he says, so they will strike the land, and I will not deliver them from their power. That day is coming, And so already you can see it happening to the United States and to other nations, but especially in the Middle East, you can see that beginning to happen. So he said, I pastured the flock doomed to slaughter. Hence, the afflicted of the flock. I took for myself 2 staffs. Now, I want to say one thing, that God is, in a way, talking here about, it seems like, about himself. I pastured the flock doomed to slaughter. Also talking about Christ. As Christ was speaking, Jerusalem would be destroyed completely in 70 A.D. Jesus would have been younger than I am now at the time that happened. Jesus would have been 70 when, maybe as much as 73, when, if he had lived till that time, because it's 40 years after Jesus. But Jesus, the people he was talking to when he was 30, a lot of them were going to still be alive. And they were the flock doomed to slaughter, because that's exactly what happened. They were slaughtered. The ones that were not slaughtered were scattered into all the countries. So he said, I pastured the flock doomed to slaughter, hence the afflicted of the flock. And I took from myself 2 staffs. The one I called favor, and the other I called union. And I can't help but wonder, Zechariah dressed as a shepherd in the shepherd's clothing and with the 2 staffs, and maybe he had written favor on one and union on the other. I don't know, or whether this is just talking about Christ. Christ had 2 staffs. He had favor in one and union in another. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But he said, I pastured the flock. Then I annihilated the 3 shepherds in 1 month, for my soul was impatient with them. That I don't know what it means, but I'm concerned about what it may mean. And if this is already talking about, as what came before it was mainly talking about the things that's going to be taking place in the next few weeks, or that's taking place at the end as we make the transition that's coming about, then it may be that the destruction of the one who probably gave the final okay for October 7th, annihilated, and others, I'm waiting, and a lot of times they do come in 3s. I'm waiting for 2 other leaders in a very short period of time, to possibly die. Now, I know that there was the president, the foreign minister, and another of the big leaders of Iran that were destroyed then. It might be that it's talking about that, but otherwise I don't know what this is talking about. Then I annihilated the 3 shepherds, he said, in 1 month. For my soul was impatient with them, and their soul was weary of me. So God eliminated them, probably talking about the Lord there. It could also be talking about Christ, but I never saw what Christ did, anything like that, so I don't think it's talking about Christ. It could also be talking about the Antichrist when the time comes. Because here's the thing, and that just clicked in my mind. The Antichrist, what's one of the first things that he's going to do? He's going to take out 3 of the leaders of the 10 nations. He's going to take out 3 of them, and so he'll be one of the 7, but he also will have all of the everything that was had by those other 3, and that may be what it's talking about. That just occurred to me now. I annihilated the 3 shepherds in 1 month. It's a possibility that very soon we may know exactly what that means when we see what takes place when this happens. But he said, and if it's talking about the Antichrist, he said, I was impatient with them. In other words, with these 3, they didn't do what I wanted and all of that. So he took 3 of the 10, so that there's now just 7 left, and he is one of those 7, but he's the leader of all of them then after that. Their soul was weary of me. Then I said, I will not pasture you. What is to die, let it die. What is to be annihilated, let it be annihilated. And that sounds more in keeping with what the Antichrist might say. Let those who are left eat one another's flesh. And so the nations are going to destroy. These groups will going to be fighting against each other, trying to eat up that which is profitable of each other, taking over. So he said, I took my staff, favor, and cut it in pieces. And so now there will no longer be favor. And I can't help but think, in a sense, this is talking about God, talking about Christ, but in a way then I see this as also the covenant that was made with humanity, because it says he will make a covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will turn his back on the covenant that he's made. And I've always taken that to be the covenant of Abraham, but it could be that's what he's talking about. This may be some reference to that we can see more of as time goes on. I took my staff, favor, cut it in pieces to break my covenant with which I had made with all the peoples, so that the covenant now is broken. It was broken on that day, and thus the afflicted of the flock who were watching me realized that it was the word of the Lord, that this is what God said was going to happen. The afflicted, those who, that probably may be us. The word afflicted there may very well be you, and it may very well be me. It might be us that is talking about there. May also be talking about the Jews or others. But the afflicted of the flock who were watching me realized that was the word of the Lord. They're going to recognize it. And here's part of the reason I'm saying that, and that is it's in this event, in these events, that Israel comes to know that God is their God. They turn completely back to God, but they turn to Christ, and they look to Christ for salvation. They recognize that he is the salvation in this. Now that's coming in the verses just to follow in chapters 12 and 13 and 14. He said to them, I said to them, if it's good in your sight, give me my wages, but if not, never mind. Those are the words of Judas. That's what Judas said about Jesus. He was willing to betray him, but what will you give me? If you'll give me something, fine. So, but if not, then never mind. But he still betrayed him. So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. So they weighed out to Judas 30 pieces of silver. You remember that. And that was his wages for betraying Christ. Then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So this then would be Christ speaking, or God speaking to Judas and telling him, throw it to the potter, but he throws it to them, as we'll see, in the temple. He throws it in the temple, and it buys the potter's field, that place where Judas will go to hang himself and then plunge headlong after hanging himself. I don't know exactly how that happened. I can imagine a lot of ways how it could have happened, but his body will fall into the potter's field, and that will be a place for indigent people or people without means to be buried. Throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. So he threw them into the house of the Lord, and you'll remember when Judas threw them in, they came out of the house of the Lord to pay him that blood money, but it became blood money when he accepted it to betray Christ. So they wouldn't take it back. And so they said, we can't put this back into the treasury. It's blood money. What can we do with it? So they took the money and they bought the potter's field. So he said, and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Now this is 500 years before the event actually took place. That event actually took place. But this one who is coming will be in the spirit of Judas. So he will also be a Judas and will do many of the same kinds of things. So said then, and I think that he said, then I cut in pieces my second staff union to break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. As we know, that day came at the end of Solomon's reign, when Rehoboam took Judah and Jeroboam took Israel, the northern tribes. But here he's going to break this, and I can't help but wonder if he's talking about between what is today we think of as Judah and what we think of as Britain, the United States, Canada, and Australia, those as being Israel, where the tribes have immigrated and all. So he said he'll break the brotherhood. And we see that it's frayed right now. The brotherhood is not broken between the nation of Israel and the United States right now, but it is really hurting and really frayed. and I'm concerned that it is going to be broken. And he said he broke that. The Lord said to me, take again for yourself the equipment of a foolish shepherd. Behold, I'm going to raise up a shepherd. Now this is definitely talking about the Antichrist here when it gets to this point. Behold, I'm going to raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for the perishing, seek the scattered, heal the broken, or sustain the one standing. Those are the things that the shepherd are supposed to do. Care for the perishing, seek the scattered, heal the broken, sustain the one standing, but will devour the flesh of the fat sheep and tear off their hooves. And so he said, take that, and so then he says this, woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. And so he is going to, by leaves them means who does not take care of them. He's not willing to do anything for them. He leaves the flock behind, the flock of God. Woe to the he's a worthless shepherd, an evil shepherd. A sword will be on his arm and on his right eye, and his arm will be totally withered, and his right eye will be blind. And we've talked about that before, how that many take from this, both the Islamists and many Christians and Jews take from this that the Antichrist, the Satan in the form of a man, will in those days that this will happen to him, and so it's in all of those writings that he will be. There may be disagreement of which arm, but not which eye, and one of them actually had a patch on his eye, or did in days gone by, seeming to indicate that, almost like that some would thought that was him. His arm will be totally withered, his right eye will be blind. And so then, at that point, the Lord will give salvation to Israel. And so that's where we'll start next time. I know we're out of time, and that's at the right point. We'll start with Zechariah chapter 12, verse 1, if the Lord says the same this coming next week at this time. All right, let's see. How do I do this? I'm wondering, am I still on here? So I wonder if that's been a black screen that whole time. I was able to get back on my end, but I bet you had a black screen the whole time. Are you able to turn on your cameras or mics or anything? There's nothing I'm able to see on there.
Yeah, your screen's okay.
The screen is okay? What is on my screen? It says what? Okay, so it did go ahead and show it all. Okay, so what I can't do apparently is just let's see. Let me try this. Okay, so okay, let's see. I'm going to try this. Aha, there we go. Oh well. So right in the middle of all that, the screen turned black, and I thought maybe I just got it back on by going back to Word. I didn't know what came back on, so I went ahead with it, so as you could tell. And so anyway, well, I'm glad that you're there. I'm glad that we all made it, so very good. All right, you can... how's that? Okay. Any questions, comments, or anything? Are we ready to pray? All right, let's go ahead and pray. Father, we're grateful for the many blessings you pour out upon us. We're thankful, and we do ask, dear Lord, that once again you'll be with us, that you'll lead us, guide us, keep us, especially in the days to come. I know, dear Lord, that the news may be confusing, maybe for some even scary, and all of that, and yet more and more of these things are coming to pass. We're beginning to see, dear Lord, your word being fulfilled even more so and very quickly, and we know from week to week, dear Lord, that things are being fulfilled. I do pray that you'll help us, dear Lord, to keep watching, praying, seeking your face, and seeking to be found in the very center of your will in all things. Lead, guide, and direct us. Be with those that were not with us tonight. Help them, dear Lord, in days to come, as well as all of these who are. Would you just bless them and give them your great mercies. Now for all that you do and all that you are, we praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, God bless you. It's good to see all of you, and we'll say good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.